Alex, I was looking at that old gate I built for my neighbor about 10 years ago. Still standing, mercifully, but the wells look like a family of blind caterpillars tried to have a meeting on the steel.
Only 10 years ago? I figured you were born with a TIG torch in your hand, Tiger. What went wrong? Did you forget to turn the gas on?
Worse, I was in a hurry. I thought I could just burn through the character on that reclaimed oil pipe. The kind of crust that looks like it's been at the bottom of the ocean since the Triassic period. I figured the heat would just vaporize the sins of the past.
Let me guess. It didn't vaporize the sins, it just invited them into the party.
Precisely. I got porosity that looked like Swiss cheese and a popping sound like a bowl of Rice Krispies on a megaphone. That's the thing about welding. Everyone wants to get to the lightning and sparks part, but the real work happens when the shop is quiet and you're covered in grinding dust. If the metal isn't screaming clean, the weld is going to be screaming for help.
It's funny you say that because most beginners, and honestly, probably some pros who are behind schedule, see surface prep as the suggested reading of the welding world. But according to everything we're looking at today, it's actually the foundation. It's like trying to paint a masterpiece on a greasy pizza box.
That is a vivid and unfortunately accurate image. Think about what we're actually doing. We're creating a molten pool of steel. If you drop a glob of grease, a flake of rust, or some old latex paint into that pool, it doesn't just disappear. It turns into gas. And since that gas has nowhere to go, once the metal freezes, it stays there as a little bubble, a tiny structural integrity destroying bubble.
So, for the folks listening who are staring at a pile of farm steel or a fresh delivery of plate, where do we actually start? Because I see mill scale mentioned everywhere, and to the uninitiated, that just looks like the color of the metal.
Mill scale is the devil's gift to the steel yard. It's that dark bluish-gray coating on hot-rolled steel. It looks like it's part of the metal, but it's actually a brittle layer of iron oxide. If you weld over it, the arc has to fight through that scale to get to the actual meat of the steel. It makes the arc jumpy, and it prevents the weld from actually fusing into the base material. You'll get a weld that looks okay on top, but is basically just sitting there like a scab, ready to pop off the first time someone bumps it.
Okay, so if I'm looking at my workpiece, I've got mill scale, I've got rust, and maybe some oil from the manufacturing process. What's the Tiger Gold standard for getting that ready?
Well, you've got to match the tool to the crime. If you've got heavy mill scale or deep pits of rust, a grinding wheel, like a Type 27, is your heavy artillery. It's going to chew through that scale and get you down to shiny silver white metal. But you have to be careful. You don't want to gouge the piece so deep you've changed the thickness of the material before you even start.
I've seen some people use those flap discs too. They seem friendlier, less like they're trying to kick back and take your thumb off.
The flap disc is the artisan's choice for cleaning. A Type 29 flap disc is great because it has that slight angle. It lets you get in there and buff away the surface contaminants without being quite as aggressive as a hard rock wheel. It leaves a finish that's ready for a first-class weld. But remember, cleaning isn't just about the top. You have to clean the edges, the back, and about an inch away from the joint on all sides.
What about the invisible enemies? I mean, I can see rust, I can see mill scale, but what about the oils or greases you mentioned?
Those are the ones that'll break your heart. You finish a beautiful looking bead, you lift your hood, and it looks like a sponge. That's usually oil or moisture, specifically with aluminum. And man, aluminum is a temperamental cat. If there's any grease, or even just the natural oxide layer that forms on aluminum, you're in for a bad time. Aluminum oxide melts at a much higher temperature than the aluminum itself. It's like trying to melt a chocolate bar that's wrapped in a fireproof blanket.
So for something like aluminum or stainless, we're talking chemical cleaners? Acetone?
Acetone is the old standby. Just, for the love of all things holy, make sure the acetone has evaporated and the rag is in a sealed bin before you strike an arc. I knew a guy who nearly turned his eyebrows into a memory because he left a soaked rag right under his welding table.
Please tell me that wasn't you.
Not that time, but close enough to feel the heat. Let's talk about the joint geometry part of prep, because cleaning is only half the battle. If you're welding something thick, you can't just butt two flat edges together and hope the heat reaches the middle. It's like trying to cook a steak by hitting it with a blowtorch for 3 seconds. The outside is charred and the inside is still mooing.
This is where the beveling comes in, right? Creating that V or U shape so the weld can actually get down into the root?
Exactly. You're carving out a canyon so you can fill it back up with molten gold or, 70S6 wire. For pipe, you want to set that bevel at about 37.5 degrees. And here's a detail people skip: the land or the root face. You don't want the edge to be razor sharp. You want a tiny flat spot, maybe the thickness of a nickel, at the very bottom. That gives the arc something to bite into without just blowing a hole through the metal immediately.
It sounds like a lot of precision work for something that's about to get blasted with thousands of degrees of heat.
It is. But that precision is what separates a part from a project. If your fit up is sloppy, meaning you've got a big gap on one side and it's tight on the other, your weld is going to pull and warp the metal. You'll end up with a table that wobbles or a frame that's 3 inches out of square. I once spent 4 hours welding a trailer frame only to realize I hadn't checked my fit up on the cross members. When the welds cooled and contracted, they pulled the whole thing into the shape of a trapezoid.
A very sturdy trapezoid, I'm sure.
It was a work of art, provided you only wanted to drive in circles.
Let's talk about the actual process of the weld after the prep. The 5-step guide mentions the root pass, the hot pass, and the filler. For the hobbyist who's used to just doing one pass and calling it a day, when does this multi-pass stuff actually become necessary?
Usually once you get over a 1/4 inch of thickness. At that point, you can't get full penetration in one go without things getting messy. The root pass is your most important move. It's the first bead at the very bottom of that V you ground. It has to be 100% fused. If the root is bad, the rest of the weld is just building a house on sand.
And the hot pass? That sounds like a marketing term for a spicy chicken sandwich.
I wish. No, the hot pass is the second bead. Its job is to burn out any little bits of slag or wagon tracks left over from the root pass. It's a bit higher heat, and it paves the way for the filler passes that actually build up the strength. Think of it like a deep clean for your weld joint while you're building it.
So, what's the biggest rookie move you see when people are trying to prep their joints? Besides the oops, I forgot to clean it approach.
Using the wrong tool for the material, for example, using a wire brush on stainless steel that you previously used on carbon steel.
Wait, why does that matter? A brush is a brush, right?
Oh, you'd think so. But those tiny bits of carbon steel get embedded in the stainless. A week later, your rust-proof stainless steel project looks like it's breaking out in chickenpox. You've essentially infected the stainless with carbon. You've got to keep your brushes segregated. I have a brush with stainless only written on it in big red marker, and I still catch myself reaching for it for the wrong job sometimes.
It sounds like welding is 10% sparking things together and 90% managing your own inventory and cleaning habits.
You're not wrong. It's a discipline of cleanliness. Even your filler wire. If you leave your TIG rods or your MIG spool out in a humid shop for 6 months, they'll develop a microscopic film of oxidation or dust. You're feeding that right into your weld pool. I've started wiping down my TIG rods with a clean Scotch-Brite pad and some solvent before I start a critical job. It sounds fussy, but it's a lot less work than grinding out an inch of porous weld.
I can see the Tiger Den philosophy forming here. Fussy now, or frustrated later.
I might have to put that on a t-shirt, or maybe just etch it into my welding helmet so I see it every morning.
Before we wrap up the technical deconstruction, tell me about spatter protection. I see these anti-spatter sprays in the store, and they feel like a cheat code for people who don't want to clean up after themselves. Are they legit?
They're a tool, not a crutch. If you're doing a lot of MIG welding, you're going to get some berries, those little balls of metal that fly off and stick to everything. Anti-spatter spray makes them pop right off with a light tap instead of needing a chisel. But, and this is a big but, you have to keep that spray away from the actual joint. If you spray the anti-spatter into the gap you're about to weld, you've just introduced a chemical contaminant into your pool. It's for the surrounding area, not the weld zone itself.
So it's like using painter's tape? It's there to protect the stuff you don't want to touch.
Precisely. And honestly, if your settings are dialed in and your metal is truly clean, your spatter should be minimal anyway. Excessive spatter is often the metal's way of telling you that it's fighting through some dirt or your voltage is wonky.
Okay, let's bring this home for the person sitting in their garage right now with a grinder in one hand and a piece of rusty steel in the other. What's the takeaway here?
The takeaway is this: your weld is only as good as the surface beneath it. You can have the most expensive computer-controlled welder in the world, but it can't fix a greasy, scaly joint. Take the extra 10 minutes. Grind until you see the silver. Bevel until the joint fits like it was born that way. When you finally pull the trigger or scratch the start, you want the arc to sing, not pop and hiss at you. Welding is a conversation between you and the metal, and you don't want to start that conversation by being rude to the surface.
I think "don't be rude to the surface" is probably the best advice I've heard all week.
It served me well. Well, mostly. after I made that trapezoid trailer anyway.
We'll save the trapezoid trailer story for the next episode. Thanks for the masterclass, Tiger.
Anytime, Alex. Now, go get some dust on those goggles.